I'm Jake Lizio, and this is a completely free course on mastering bar chord technique and theory. I've arranged this course into 11 different lessons. Each one has its own page, its own video, and its own musical examples. It's completely free. You can just visit my site, sign up for a free account, and you can access the course immediately. There are links below in the description. I'm making this course because bar chords are the most difficult and frustrating phase of any guitar player's journey, and I really do believe that with the advice and the guidance that I'm about to present here, I can make that journey much less painful and even a little bit enjoyable. I also know that if you enjoy this course, you will love the premium courses that I offer as well. So, while you're on my website, do check out some of my other offerings. I just released Real Rhythm Guitar Level 1, which is a comprehensive guide into the fundamentals of rhythm guitar. I'd say it's about 4 months of intensive rhythm training, and it'll really help take the skills that you're learning here in this course and advance them to a more professional level. Before we start playing our guitar, there's a few things we need to make sure of. First, I want you to make sure you're taking this course correctly. It is meant to be taken in order, and it is meant to be taken with time and pace. You're not supposed to just speed from one lesson to the next one, especially if you are new to this topic. If you're an intermediate player, sure, maybe you can skip past the first few lessons. But this topic, especially with bar chords, requires time. There is no shortcut. There is consistency and there is right practice, and if you do those things, you will be able to play your bar chords. So I do expect and recommend you take about 1 week in between each one of these lessons. Watch the video first, and then go through the text on the actual chapter and go through the exercises on your own before moving on to the next lesson. Next, it's really important that you have the right equipment. If you're working on an acoustic guitar or an electric guitar, in either case, you need to make sure it's set up correctly. What I mean by setup is the action needs to be correct. The action is the distance between our fretboard and our string, right? I can fit my pick in between my fretboard and my string. I could probably actually fit 2 picks in between there. But anything past that, well, now the string is really high off the fretboard, and even an experienced guitar player like myself, I am going to struggle to play bar chords on a guitar that is not set up correctly. So it is imperative, especially with this topic, that you're working on a guitar that is set up correctly and that the action is correct. If you don't know if your action is correct, just try to ask another guitar player. Hand him the guitar and ask him, how does this feel to you? Does this action feel a little bit off? You can make those kind of action adjustments on your own, but I do recommend taking them to a luthier or guitar shop and having those things set up. But you want to set yourself up for success. And if you're practicing on an instrument that's not set up well, this will be impossible to perform. What's less important is using the right pick. I do want to make sure that you're not using too heavy of a pick. I would really recommend something under 1 millimeter, so something like 0.9, 0.8, and also not something too light. We want to start off with something in the middle range there, so maybe 0.7, 0.8. But if you've got too thick of a pick, you're going to start developing a very chunky strum, and the opposite, if you've got too light of a pick, it's just going to start forcing some technique errors that we don't necessarily need, especially on an electric guitar. And speaking of electric versus acoustic, I do recommend, if you have the opportunity, practice on your electric. Go through this entire course on your electric. It's easier to play bar chords on an electric guitar. At least it should be, because the action is closer and the strings are thinner, so it requires less pressure. Some people will say, oh, you should practice on your acoustic guitar because it's harder, and then it becomes easy on the electric. My philosophy is bar chords are hard enough as it is. Let's make it as easy for ourselves as possible. Then, when we need to ramp up our technique, we can. And lastly, I just want you to set some expectations. If you are brand new to guitar, and if you are just approaching bar chords for the first time, I want you to expect that this is going to be difficult. But I also really think this is the hardest and most difficult hurdle you'll ever have to overcome as a guitar player. The thing that's challenging about it is it just takes time. There is no shortcut. The bar chord skill is one that develops most of the time over months. Maybe if you're unlucky, it's a little bit longer. If you're very lucky, maybe it's a little bit quicker. But I would expect failure right at first. Just be prepared for these first few lessons to think, I'm not doing it. But then, magically, really, in just a few nights, after you've gotten through the right practice, it just shifts into something that becomes easy. So just be prepared for that. Be prepared for these first few lessons to feel impossible. But just like every other guitar player on the planet who has figured that out, you'll find out this stuff is actually kind of easy if you just give it enough time. We're finally going to play our first bar chord. And to do that, what I first want you to do is play an E major chord in open position. You've probably seen that chord. It looks like this. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually play it with the wrong fingers. Instead of using my first 3 fingers, I'm going to use my last 3 fingers. So I've got my middle finger, my ring finger, my pinky, and then my middle finger. these notes just like that, all right? So this is the way I'm going to play my E major, and you'll notice how it keeps my index finger free. My index finger is totally free. So your first step is to get comfortable with this. If you've never played E like this, it might feel a little strange, but you're going to want to get comfortable with this shape right here, getting your fingers, these 3 fingers, locking into that shape. Now, what I'd like you to do is practice locking these fingers in place and just sliding them around on your fretboard, all right? You see how I'm just moving my fingers around here and I'm locking that shape? I'm making sure that these 2 fingers, my ring finger and my pinky, are on the same fret, and then my middle finger is just tucked behind. This is another skill you're gonna need to be able to achieve when you're playing your bar chords. We're just breaking it down into this simple little aspect of these fingers. We're not worrying about the bar right now, okay? So now that you're comfortable kind of locking your fingers into the shape, right, freezing your fingers into the shape, notice that I'm not doing this. I'm not letting my fingers kind of slide around. I'm really trying to, you know, ossify them, turn them into stone. So as I slide around here, they completely are frozen in that shape. And once I've done that, what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to move over so that these fingers are on frets 7 and 6. All right, so ring finger and pinky are on 7, my middle finger is on 6. This is going to get me in position to now play my bar chord. What I would want to do is I want to take my index finger and I want to slam it down all the way across the 5th fret. And your job this entire week, you have one goal, and that's to get every one of these notes ringing out. All right, that's 6 different notes that I'm playing there. And this is much, much more difficult than it might sound, especially as a beginner. But I have some tips here for you to how to do this. How do we actually get all these notes ringing out? Because there's a very good chance right now that it sounds like this for you. Right? I know that sound. I've dealt with that sound plenty of times with beginners. Don't worry. I've got some tips here for you. The first thing you need to keep in mind is the positioning of your thumb. If your thumb is wrapped over the top of the neck, you will not be able to provide any pressure to that bar that we're slamming down. The thumb is really the driver of all of the pressure for a bar chord. And if my thumb's up here wrapped on top, well, now I've got a squeezy bar chord and my first finger can't really stick out flat like that. So I want you to really experiment with the positioning of your thumb. If you'll notice as I'm playing it right here, I'll kind of let you sneak a peek here on the back. My thumb is basically on the back of the fretboard in the center. All right, I'm right there in the center where that strip is, and it's pointing off towards the side. It's pointing off towards the headstock. My thumb isn't pointing straight up. It's not pointing that way. It's angled off this way, and it's right there in the center. That allows me to create this clamping motion. Next, it's very important that you recognize that the center of the fret is not the best place to play a fret. All right, so check it out. If I put my index finger here on just the 5th fret of the 3rd string and start playing it, listen to what sounds like if I scoot my finger over towards the headstock. All right, I'm keeping the pressure the same, but listen to what's happening to my note. My note is no longer fretting out, or it's no longer ringing out. It's muted. And I didn't cheat. I'm really trying to put the pressure on there. Now, on the other side of the fret, as I move over this way towards the bridge, I can get very close to this fret and apply very little pressure. I'm barely touching the string right here. And you can see my finger's almost on top of the fret, but this is much easier to get ringing out. So what I want you to do is I want you to opt for this side of the fret. I want you to bias all of your fingers to this side of the fret. When we position our fingers on frets 7 and 6 like we did earlier, all right, instead of being on the centers of those frets, or worse, being on this side of the fret, you really want to shove your fingers as much as you can to this side of the fret, all right, as much as humanly possible. Don't be afraid of even getting on top of that fret. And that makes it even easier to do the same thing with your index finger. Now, with my index finger, you'll notice that I'm not here in the center of the fret, I'm over here on the edge of the fret. And that's going to be much easier at getting things ringing out. Just showing you, if I move my fingers over this way, same thing. Do you hear that? This note is having trouble ringing out. That note is having trouble ringing out just because I'm on the wrong side of the fret. All right, so very important, opt on this side. Just bias your fingers to that side. Another important aspect is that your index finger is not very efficient at barring on the front. The front side of your finger is the fleshy, paddy side of your finger. There's these wrinkles in there, there's these creases in there, and it's not a very good idea to try to bar with the front of your finger. Instead, what you want to try to do is maybe bar with the side of your finger. So what I mean by that is here's my hand in a perfect flat position bar chord, but what I actually do as a guitar player is I kind of tilt my hand this way, and that way it's this side of my finger that's kind of, and that's a bonier part of your finger, right? There's less paddy flesh right there. So you can even see I'm kind of tilting my hand a little bit to get more of a skewed angle with my index finger right there. And now that you'll see that my bar isn't doing this, it's kind of doing this. It doesn't have to be this completely stiff arrangement. It can be this kind of more curled up arrangement as well. And that actually makes it more comfortable. It requires less tension and less pressure for your thumb. So experiment with that using the edge of your index finger. Additionally, those creases in your fingers might just be in the worst spot. They might be like right above a string, and no matter how hard you push down, you're not going to get it to fret because you're not even touching your finger. You're touching like a crease in your finger. That's why I really want you to experiment with the height of your first finger, all right? So instead of just putting your first finger down like this and playing a bar chord, try taking your first finger and lifting up higher than it needs to be, all right? You'll see my elbow has to drop down for that, all right? So my elbow has to drop down because my thumb has to drop down, but it allows my index finger to go way beyond where it needs to be. All right. Alternatively, try putting your first finger lower than it needs to be. Maybe instead of being up here, you're just catching the very bit of that sixth string, all right? And that allows you to find the sweet spot for your finger, all right? Everybody's biology is going to be different. So you do need to experiment to find that sweet spot for you. How much angle, how much bend, how high, how low, where's your thumb? And doing this over the course of a week. Remember, your only goal this week is to try to get this happening. And I don't care how long it takes. If it takes you 10 minutes to get into this chord shape, you've succeeded this week. But your job is to get it ringing out and figure out, how did I do it? What did I do with my thumb? What did I do with my fingers? Where did I place things? That's your job this week. And lastly, I just want to comment on this idea that it is a good idea to practice just doing one big bar. You know, just take your first finger and learn to clamp on the string to see if you can get all the notes ringing out. That means that your clamping pressure is good. That means that you're on the right side of the fret. That means your thumb's in a good position. But your index finger doesn't need to do all this work. When we do a bar chord, your index finger just needs to hit this note, and this note, and this note. So really don't worry so much if your finger's hitting all of the notes. It doesn't have to hit all the notes. It really only has to hit this one, and this one. And you can do that with more of a curled index finger, as I'm doing here, right? You can see my index finger, these middle notes, I'm not quite getting them because I don't need to. I'm really focusing my pressure on just the right parts of my finger to make it as easy and tension-free as possible when I play this bar chord shape. Now, for your exercises this week, you simply are trying to get the notes of a single bar chord ringing out. That's your main objective. And we did it here on the 5th fret, right? But we can do it anywhere on our fretboard. We could slide this whole configuration over to the 7th fret. And as we keep sliding up, our fingers get closer and closer together. It gets harder and harder. Like doing a bar chord all the way on the 12th fret takes some clever manipulation of your fingers. But down low, I think, is the hardest spot. If we go down to the 1st fret, well, the tension on the strings is harder here. You can just feel it, that it takes more effort to push down a string here. So these are going to be the hardest bar chords you can play, is down on the 1st fret like this. Also, the frets are stretched out more, so your fingers have a little bit more work to do this way. So that's why I'm recommending start here on the 5th fret, start on the 7th fret. Anywhere in the middle of the fretboard is a great place to begin your practice. However, you should be practicing, especially if you got quick with it. Let's say after a few days you got it ringing out. We'll try doing it on the different frets in all of the different positions, all right? For the next exercise, what I'd like to do is string together an open chord with some bar chords. And it's going to sound as simple as this. We're going to play the chord E in open position, and we're going to play it with the wrong fingers, just like we already discussed. So I've got these fingers right here in E major. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to slide everything over so I can bar the 3rd fret. That means my fingers are going to be in frets 5 and 4. So it's frets 3, 5, and 4. I'm going to bar that chord, and I'm going to slide over 2 frets, and I'm going to do a 5th fret bar chord. And I'm going to play this with this following timing. I'm just going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. That's the exercise. And the nice thing about playing that E with the wrong fingers is it makes the switch just a little bit easier. If you try playing E with the correct fingers, it's harder to move from E like this. Then all of your fingers have to move around to get into that bar chord. All right? So just getting used to that, because it's a pretty common trick to play E or E minor A or A minor, some of those other chords we'll see, with the wrong fingers, because it gets you ready for a bar chord. Your last exercise for this first week involves taking some common open chords and combining it with that really difficult first fret bar chord, which is going to be called F. So what we're going to try doing is we're going to try taking a regular C major chord, which hopefully you've seen before, and we're going to take two A minor chords, and then we're going to switch our fingers into a first fret bar chord for what's called F, and then we're going to slide this F position up to create a G chord. Maybe you've seen G like this, maybe you've seen G like this. We're going to play G like this. And don't worry about why it's called that. We'll get into the theory later on. Right now, just think about the names or the shapes of these chords and how we're getting there. We're starting with open position C. We're going to strum it twice. We're going to strum open position A minor twice. The hard switch here, this is really difficult, is getting your fingers into this chord, getting it to ring out. But once you're there, it should be fairly easy to just whoop, move your fingers over, and now you're in G. And it's really a hard switch getting back to C. But this is like a classic doo-wop chord progression. If you get really comfortable with it, you can try arpeggiating it, picking it one note at a time. Same exact chord shapes and just pick some notes out of each chord. Or do the same thing in 6/8 timing. So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right, so that is your first week and introduction into bar chords. I think it's going to be as difficult as this entire course ever gets for you if you're new. It's never going to get harder than just getting those notes ringing out. But spend your time with it, practice slowly. Don't worry if things don't ring out. Don't worry if your fingers hurt. You've got a few more weeks until this stuff starts gelling into place. So that's why we're going slow, and that's why the exercises are so basic. And don't even worry if the exercises aren't perfectly on time. We've got plenty of time to get your rhythm skills up to par. What we just learned is commonly referred to as the E-shaped bar chord, but I don't want to use that terminology in this course. Instead, here's what I want you to think about. Whatever the lowest note of that shape is, so wherever we played it, if we play it here, if we play it here, if we play it here, whatever the bottom note is on the 6th string, the thick string, whatever the name of that note is, that's the name of the chord we're playing. So like, what was this low note here? Well, this note is G, so I'm playing a G major chord. All right, what about here? Well, now the low note is B, so I'm playing a B major chord. What about now? Well, the low note is F sharp, so I'm playing an F sharp major chord. So we're looking at the note on the 6th string as our reference to figuring out what chord are we playing. That's why I like to call this shape that we're learning, this shape, I like to call it the 6th string major shape. And that tells us, hey, we're creating a major chord, which is one of the many types of chords that musicians can create, and we're finding the root on the 6th string. And that way I don't start dragging letters into it. So I'm going to stop. I'm not going to use that E-shaped thing anymore. I'm just going to say 6th string major. That's what we have learned. All right. And with this 6th string major shape, we can now play every single major chord in history. And we can name all of those major chords as long as we know the notes on our 6th string. So this is your job this week, is to figure out the notes on this string. That way you can start applying the shape, and that way you can start playing chords. When somebody says, play me a C sharp major, and D flat or E flat, you know how to do that because you know your 6th string. And it's actually quite simple. Here, your open 6th string is E, but here on the 1st fret, we get F. On the 3rd, we get G. Continuing forward, we have A, B, C, D, and E. Those are the natural notes. Those are the notes that don't have sharps or flats. Those notes are the same as the white keys on a piano. They're very easy to find on a piano. They're kind of hard to find here on our guitar. But you need to memorize where those are. You need to memorize that, oh, this note is A. That way when I say, hey, play me an A major bar chord, well, you can find A and you can play the 6th string major shape. And when I say, I need a C major chord, you can find C and you can play the 6th string major shape. Same shape creates all of those chords. Now, as I said, those natural notes are the white keys on our piano. The black keys on our piano we can think of as accidentals. Those are notes like sharp or flat. And I want you to think of as sharp as just having been moved up, and flat as having been moved down. So here's F. What happens when I move F up? I get F sharp. All right? But we could have also called this note G flat, because here's G. What happens when I move G down? I get G flat. So this note right here has two different names. We can call it F sharp. We can call it G flat. I don't care what note you call it. There are rules on when you're supposed to call it G flat or F sharp. We're not going to worry about that in this course. So for right now, whenever you think of something like sharp, just think about moving it up. When you think about flat, it's just been moved down. Now, here's an important piece of chord theory for you. Every single major chord, and that's all we've learned so far is how to play major chords, every major chord only consists of 3 notes. Which might seem weird because it looks like we're playing more than 3 notes, right? When I play this, aren't I playing 6 different strings? Well, if you really look at the notes, if you add up and figure out the fretboard, you'll see it's just 3 notes repeating. I'll count them out. This note here is A, this is an E, here's another A, here's a C sharp, here's another E, and here's another A. So we really only had the notes A, C sharp, and E, and we've just layered them up on top of each other to get this big sounding chord. Now, seeing that might clue you off to the idea that there's lots of ways to play an A major chord. It just happens to be that this little shape that we're learning is an easy and convenient way to create the notes A, C sharp, and E in that order. So hopefully that gives you some insight into what we actually learned. What we've done is we've learned a shape, not a chord. We've learned a shape that produces chords. Specifically, it produces major chords with their root on the 6th string. And those chords only contain 3 notes every single time. So this contains a set of 3 notes, this is a different set of 3 notes, and we can name them easily as long as we know the musical alphabet, those natural notes, and the accidentals in between. So our week 2 exercises are going to consist of some pretty basic ideas here. We're still trying to get comfortable with this bar chord shape, so I don't want to add too many new ideas to our technique. We're just trying to touch on our theory in this lesson. So our first exercise is simply going to go from the chord A to the chord C to the chord G to the chord F. And you want to be thinking about the fret locations. Where is A on my 6th string? That's here. Where is C on the 6th string? That's here on the 8th fret. Where's G? That's the 3rd fret, and then F is the 1st fret. Hopefully these exercises that you're practicing will help kind of commit these to memory. Try to really memorize the names of those notes. And for every one of those frets, we're going to play the 6th string major shape. And that means the chords we're playing are A major. We'll strum it 4 times. We'll slide our fingers over to C. We'll slide our fingers over to G. And we'll slide our fingers over to F. All right? This is a very classic kind of alternative rock, 90s style, alt rock strumming chord pattern that you'd see where it's just major chords slid around that are, and especially if you speed it up. So I'm giving you this exercise that's pretty basic on the right hand, but depending on how comfortable you are with these bar chords, you should be able to speed it up or slow it down to your own comfort level. Your second exercise is going to use these 4 bar chords. F sharp, which I know is the 2nd fret, so I'm going to play the shape there. The next chord is E, and I could play E all the way up here on the 12th fret, but that's kind of ridiculous. Instead, what I'm going to do is just play that open E with the wrong fingers. Then, after that, I'm going to be moving to an A chord, and then I'm going to move to a B chord on the 7th fret. But this time, my strumming is not just going to be 4 down strums. This time, we're going to have an accent on the 3rd strum. So I'm going to strum 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And that 3rd strum, I'm just going to hit all of the strings really loud. The other strums, I might only hit a few notes of the bar chord. So you'll see me playing the full bar chord with this hand, but my pick might only be hitting a few notes until I... Right, hear that? And that gives me a nice, dynamic, interesting rhythm pattern as opposed to just blah, 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 blah. Right? So we're trying to get used to dynamics here. That's one of the little skills we're trying to sneak in to our studies here is 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. All right? 2 simple exercises, but I understand if they still feel really complex right now. If you're taking this week by week, I would still expect this to be extremely challenging. And I would expect that maybe in about 3 or 4 more weeks, your fingers stop hating you and you actually start believing me that this is doable. It's time to learn another bar chord shape. This one is going to, again, have its root on the 6th string, so we don't have to memorize any new note locations. But we do have to learn a new positioning for our fingers. What we'll do now is we'll play an E minor chord with the wrong finger. So that means we're just going to use these 2 fingers like this. I'm going to put my ring finger and my pinky like this. This is an E minor, right? But if I slide it around, well, now I can bar it and I have a movable minor shape. So we'll basically do the same thing as before. We'll move our fingers over here to the 7th fret. I've got my ring finger and my pinky here on 7th fret on strings 5 and 4. And then my index finger is going to come and bar down just like this. And you already know the tips, right? We've got to stay on the edge of the fret. We've got to use the side of the finger. We've got to experiment with this height. We've got to make sure our thumb is in the right spot. But this is harder. We now need to get this note ringing out on the 3rd string. And it is difficult to get that note ringing out. Especially if you haven't done this, expect a little bit of a challenge right there. You might have to worm this finger around some different spots until you find the sweet spot there to get this minor shape ringing out. Now, very briefly, I want you to understand the difference between a major chord and a minor chord. An A major and an A minor are two different types of A chords, correct? But you can hear that one sounds completely different than the other. Major chords, an A major chord just sounds brighter and happier and more optimistic and more smiley than an A minor chord, which by contrast is a little more haunting, a little bit more sad, more morose, right? So immediately I want you to just, as a general rule of thumb, it's helpful to think major is happy, minor is sad. That's not the whole picture, but it's helpful as a beginner to just distinguish them like that. But I also want you to know that minor chords also only have 3 notes. All right, remember major chords only contain 3 notes. Minor chords work the same way. If we look at the notes here, we'll notice that we're playing an A, an E, another A C, and then an A and an E. So this is just the notes A, C, and E. Whereas the A major chord was the notes A, C sharp, and E. That means the only difference between major chords and minor chords is that little note here in the middle, all right? In music theory, we call that a third. We're not going to get into traditional intervals, but I want you to know that that note, which is called the third, that's the only difference between major and minor chords. So I want you to see that on your fretboard as you're playing. I want you to see that every major chord you're playing is only 1 fret away from a minor chord. And if you see a fret changing from major to minor, you know, oh, that's the third. That's the third going from major to minor. Now, to get used to this new minor bar chord shape, all we're going to do is take that simple shape, which is pretty difficult to play, I admit it, but it's simple in concept. We're going to take it and we're just going to slide it around to a few different frets. We're going to play an F sharp minor chord. That's going to be on the 2nd fret. And then we're going to go to a C sharp minor chord. That's going to be all the way up on the 9th fret. And then we're going to move to a B minor, which is on the 7th fret. And then we're going to move back to the F sharp minor chord. All right. And then we'll repeat that whole thing. So 4 strums of F sharp minor, 4 strums of C sharp minor on the 9th fret, 4 strums of B minor on the 7th fret, and then 4 strums back to F sharp minor. One little last piece of advice here for you is that when your finger, since your middle finger's free here, if you'd like to, and if you really need to, you can kind of double up the pressure on that finger. You might have seen me doing that over here on C sharp here. I figured, hey, why not just take this middle finger and just add it? Just add the pressure of that middle finger right there, just as a security blanket. Do I need it? No, but it can go there. So I've seen that happen plenty of times. There's nothing wrong with that as long as it doesn't disturb the rest of your technique, using that middle finger for added pressure on these minor bar chord shapes. We're going to reverse course from all of the hard work we've been practicing. And instead of trying to get the chord ringing out, what we're instead going to do is practice the chord not ringing out. And what we get is something that I like to call a chukka-chukka, but it's often called a muted strum. And it's a very easy technique to accomplish. All you do is get your fingers into a bar chord. All right, so here I am getting ready for a G bar chord, and it rings out just fine, correct? But instead of actually applying any pressure from my thumb, I'm going to stop pushing down with my thumb. Now my fingers are contacting the strings, but they're not pushing down hard enough for them to ring out. And what I get is this muted strum sound, which sounds really nice in fast passages, and it usually takes as part of a rhythm. So you'll do like a strum, strum, chukka, chukka, strum, strum, chukka, chukka. And that's exactly the first thing I'd like you to practice here for this week's lesson, is I'd like you to practice that strumming pattern of strum, strum, chukka, chukka between 2 different bar chords. The bar chord sequence we'll practice is A minor, so we've got the minor shape on the 5th string, and I'm doing down, down, chukka, chukka, down, down, chukka, chukka, down, down, chukka, chukka. Then I move to G, but I play a major chord. G, down, down, chukka, chukka. Again, A minor, G. Simple little exercise that should get you practice switching those chords in between and getting used to this chukka-chukka idea. Now let's branch off of that same concept. What I'd like you to do is take your G chord and just strum down, up, down, up, down, up with your right hand. And what you're going to try doing is you're going to try to chukka every other 2 strums. So you'll do like a down, and then there will be 2 chukkas, and then an up, and then 2 chukkas. Down, up, 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 down, up. This is a really good exercise to get you used to cross rhythms. Our hand is working in a cycle of 2, down, up, down, up, down, up. But we're doing this muting pattern in a cycle of 3, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up. And to put this together, we can get something that's very reminiscent of the end of Stairway to Heaven. I won't teach the exact chord progression there, but if you can do this, you can play the end of Stairway to Heaven. We've got A minor, down, down, chukka, chukka, down, down, chukka, chukka. Then this pattern on G major. A minor, down, up, down, up, down, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, down. So that is a more advanced exercise for you this week if you'd like to try something with a little bit more of a challenge to it. If your bar chord's already comfortable and you're trying to get that right hand working a little bit harder, excellent exercise. And like I said, if you can do that, just learn the chords for Stairway to Heaven and you're playing the end of that song. Now, on this concept specifically, I do want to comment that there's a few little pitfalls you might run into. If you're chukkaing directly above a harmonic area on your guitar, so the common harmonic areas, the really prominent ones, the 12th fret, the 7th fret, the 5th fret, if my finger is right above that while I'm chukkaing, I won't get a chukka, right? I've got this, things are ringing out. So if that happens, you're free to kind of, move your hand around so it doesn't ring out as much. And you can also see you can leave the bar chord shape behind. You can see instead of locking my fingers in place and just releasing the pressure, I'm actually spreading out my fingers. So this isn't always a big deal. I just want you to be aware of it, especially if you've got some distortion on your guitar, then these chukkas might start ringing out a little bit more than you might suspect, all right? So just something to be aware of. When we rest a note in music, we completely stop it from ringing out. As a guitar player, the way we would normally see that done is we strum a chord, and then we use our right hand to slam down on the strings like this. In this lesson, I want you to practice the fretting hand rest. You'll strum a chord, and then you'll stop squeezing, right? And just by stop squeezing so hard, the chord can't ring out. Now, the mistake you might make here is taking off all your fingers. That's not the way to do it. The other mistake you might make is some of your fingers are still touching the fretboard. So you do have to practice this pretty slowly, just doing a strum and then remove the finger. Strum, 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 strum. And this is what I want you to practice for now, before we get into the exercises, is just learning to poke people with a chord. Instead of having these long flowing strums, now you're just stabbing them with a chord. And we call that staccato. In music, anytime a note is short or choppy, we call that a staccato rhythm. And that's what we're practicing now, is staccato strums. The way I want you to practice this is like the following. I want you to tap your foot on a steady pulse. Maybe you can hear that, hopefully you can. And in between those steady pulses, I want you to try doing this staccato strum, all right? So I'm going to do a foot tap, and then right in between every one of these, I'm going to do the strum. Right? We would call this a syncopated rhythm, and hopefully you hear that it's kind of bouncy and it's fun. Compare that to if I did on the beats. Listen, this is me doing... drivey, that's stompy, right? That doesn't have the bounce of a syncopated rhythm. So that's your practice here, is learn to do this staccato rhythm with syncopation, because that's the way we'll most commonly hear it done. You're going to practice that technique on the following chord progression. It goes B minor, A major, G major, F sharp. So the first chord was minor, the rest were major, and this chord progression is known as the Andalusian cadence. It's a very popular chord progression. I talk about it extensively in the Chord Progression Codex. I have videos about it on my YouTube channel. It's in the Theory and Songwriting course. Really fun recipe for a good song. And all we're going to do is take that chord progression and apply our new syncopated staccato rhythm, which is going to sound like this. I'll tap my foot and I'll do 1, switch, A, then G, and F sharp. All right, that's our exercise, exercise 1. But I also want you to practice this using down strums instead. Or I'm sorry, up strums like this. Right? Same exact thing. but it sounds a little bit different because we're hitting the strings in a different order. You know, our ear can detect the difference between this and this, right? There is a difference there. And what you'll see a lot in ska and reggae songs is that they really prefer the upstroke because you can kind of snap into these high strings, right? Now I'm ignoring the low strings. We'll talk a little bit about that later. So your exercise is syncopated strums, staccato, with upstrokes, just as I've demonstrated. Once you can do that, I think a fun little variation is to just add in one bass note pick strum, or one bass note pick for every chord. So instead of just doing these ups, I'm going to start with this note. Then I'll do everything as we just practiced, like this. Bass and strum, 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 and bass up, 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 bass. So fun exercise, should challenge you, get this technique up to speed and give you an example of what it sounds like in the real world. Now I'm going to give you the hardest exercise in the entire course. This exercise only uses 2 chords, G and F. And the first thing you need to do is get really good at switching between these 2 chords back and forth. As fast as you can, you're gonna need it. I'll play you this rhythm fast, and then I'll play it slow, but you're just going to need to break it down bit by bit. It's combining down strums, up strums, and you need to be very specific of when are we doing our staccato? When are we killing the chord immediately, and when does it ring out? Because if you get that wrong, you won't get the right effect. You won't have it sound like tequila, which is what we're trying to sound like here. So here's what it sounds like at a faster tempo. We've got G, G, F. And at a slower tempo, I'll walk you through it. We've got G, G, F. And those 2 Gs were staccato. So G, G, F. Practice that first. Then the next part, we've got 2 upstrokes with staccato. And then I'm going to do one more upstroke, but it switches immediately to F with a down. That's the hardest part. Up, 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 down. Once you've got that down, that's staccato. And then the last one rings out. So this tricky part again, up, 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 down, down. Putting the whole thing together, we've got down, 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 up, 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 down, 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 up, 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 down, down. And as I lose my pick, I'll continue with my finger. Nasty rhythm, very difficult. I figured I'd give you something challenging just in case you wanted to go that direction. But this does give you a good idea of the kind of rhythm skills you are going to be expected to know in the future. You know, Tequila is not some crazy advanced song. It's not Dream Theater, it's not Slayer, it's Tequila. And that rhythm is a standard kind of rhythm you're going to see on the guitar. So if you enjoyed practicing this, or if you're struggling practicing this, either or, I really recommend you check out Real Rhythm Guitar Level 1. It's really training these kinds of skills, the timing, the speed, the understanding, the dynamics. And I personally think it's if you enjoyed this, you'll really enjoy that course. This entire time, we've only been working on chords with their roots on the 6th string. It's finally time to look at our 5th string, understand the notes that are available to us there, and understand the new shapes that we can use to play bar chords there. For starters, I need you to know that the 5th string on its own is A, and the natural notes of the string can be found here. We've got B, C, D, E, F, G, and A. So it is absolutely a priority of yours to memorize those note locations. And then it makes it very easy to find all the other notes in between. If you need to find a C sharp, well, here's a C, just sharp it. Now you have C sharp. Need an E flat? Well, here's E, just flat it. You have E flat. Let's take the note D, which is the 5th fret of the 5th string. And what we'll do here is putting our index finger here, we're going to build the major and minor shapes that we will need to master. The major shape is really hard. Just letting you know right now. What we have to do is we have to put our index finger here, and we have to put our ring finger out on the next fret, 2 frets over, and then we have to squash it down like this. So it's contacting 3 different strings. This will be easier if you're on the wrong side of the fret. It'll be impossible if you're over here. So really go back to the earlier lessons of this course to make sure your technique is correct when it comes to fretting these things. But I have a root note, and I have these 4 notes total. And then I'm gonna call this a bonus note at the end. We also want our index finger to bar and hit this first note on this first string note, okay? So this shape I call the broken finger chord, but we are going to think of it as the 5th string major shape. You might also hear it called the A-shaped bar chord, because if you did slide it all the way down here, it would look like an A major chord, but I don't want to use that terminology in this course. So we've got this major shape, and right now, since we started on the note D, we're playing a D major chord. The minor shape is much easier, okay? The minor shape, we put our index finger here, and we do this, which should look suspiciously familiar, right? Doesn't this look a lot like our 6th string major shape? Well, it's very similar, but they're different, all right? So don't confuse this with this. This is a major shape. That is a minor shape. They have roots on different strings. Very important. Now let's go back to that major shape, because it really is a doozy. And I want to give you some specific advice on how to get that ringing out. First thing is that everybody's going to have a varying degree of success. And I did call this first string note a bonus note, right? I don't expect everyone on the planet to be able to get that note ringing out. I have seen people where biologically, the shape of their fingers, they're just not going to get it easily. But the first 4 notes, these ones, you can get ringing out, and you can get them ringing out cleanly, and everyone can get into the ability of being able to do that accurately and quickly. So if you can at least start here, then slowly trying to work in that last note, it's a good idea. It helps if your finger has this ability to bend backwards, right? Some people's fingers just don't have that ability to flex backwards, but if your finger does flex backward, that's what you're going to be doing on the fretboard. It's not going to be curled up to produce this note. It's going to have to flex back. That way the first string can actually have some clearance there. Also keep in mind that your index finger doesn't need to be barring, like really all your index finger needs is this note and that note. So don't put a lot of force onto this index finger when it really only needs a tiny bit of pressure. So here's me showing what the index finger actually has to do, right? It only has to hit those 2 notes. Notice that I'm not even positioning it to get that note ringing out, because the ring finger is supposed to take care of that note. Same thing here. So these notes, I'm not pushing down on them because it's wasted energy, all right? I'm only pushing down on the notes that actually need to get ringing out, all right? So another little tip there to try to get in this whole shape ringing out. Also, please practice on an electric, especially right now as a beginner. If you have that opportunity, this is way harder on an acoustic guitar. And make sure you're practicing in the middle of the fretboard. I think B flat major is the hardest bar chord. So if you can play this on your instrument, then you're in great shape. But if you can't, I get it. I totally understand. To put all this to use, what we're going to do is practice one of the most popular chord progressions in history, which is called a 1-4-5. We're not going to go into the music theory of why it's called a 1-4-5. If you do want to know more about that stuff, I highly recommend you check out my book, The Chord Progression Codex, which is really just an exploration of chord theory and how chords work together to make music. And the 1-4-5 is taught very early in that book. So what we're going to do is we're going to start on A major, and the strumming pattern is going to go like this. We're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, chugga, 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 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, chugga, chugga, chugga. That's the pattern we'll do for every chord, but the chord will switch from A to D, and we'll play D with our new bar chord shape. Then we'll go up to back to A, and then we'll jump up to an E chord. All right, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, chugga, 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 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, chugga, 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 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, chugga, 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 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, chugga. Now I know I'm playing this fast, but this is just to give you an idea of what it should sound like once you've got it well practiced. But one thing I want you to keep in mind is you'll see my fingers are switching during the chugga chugga, right? Why would I keep my fingers here for something that's supposed to sound like garbage, right? My fingers can be anywhere, right? My hand could be upside down on the guitar. It still sounds chugga chugga. So if I don't need to be anywhere, why don't I start moving my fingers into the next chord? And you'll see me doing that as I'm chugga chugga-ing. I'm getting my fingers preemptively ready for the next chord, and it helps me get there on time. So use that valuable chugga time, and you'll hear this in a lot of rhythm guitar patterns. You'll see a lot of guitar players, there's chuggas at the end of the power chord because it gives them time to move. You hear this in punk rock, you hear this in metal, you'll hear it in power chord stuff, not just bar chords. So hopefully this is a cool way to kind of tie together some of the switching technique and some of the chugga technique with this new, very difficult shape that we've learned. Your next exercise is to take this chord progression and to figure out how to play it all on your own using bar chords. The chord progression goes E, G sharp major, C sharp minor, and B. Now, E, we really only have one convenient way. Well, I don't know if there's any convenient way to play it as a bar chord. If you really think about your options, E, you could play as an open chord, which we're not allowed to do. You must play it as a bar chord. You could play it on the 12th fret of the low string, right? This is an E major bar chord, 6th string. Or we could play the broken finger bar chord, the 5th string shape, here on E. So really, you know, our options aren't that great. We're either playing this bar chord or this bar chord. But after that, you'd have the chord G sharp. I want you to figure out where to play G sharp and how to play G sharp, and then C sharp minor as well, and then B. You should be able to figure out a way to do that chord progression. Whether it's the way I do it is irrelevant, all right? That's the idea of being a good guitar player and a good rhythm guitar player, is you're going to be able to take these ideas, these concepts, and come up with your own way to serve them up. When somebody says, hey, play me this chord progression, there's not one way to do that. There's a billion ways to do it. And hopefully right now you're getting in a little bit of the taste of, you know, how do you want to play this chord progression? It's time to learn the most important concept for a modern musician. This is diatonic chords. I know that sounds scary, like scary music theory. Don't worry. We don't even need to sight read. We don't even need to know note names to do this. What we're going to do is we're going to start taking the chord shapes we've already learned, and we're going to learn how to write music with them. Now, this will take a few steps, but I promise they'll be easy. Step one is to learn this scale shape. This is a shape, right? It generates scales. Just like this is a shape. It's not a chord. This is not a chord. What this does is generate major chords, right? We can put this anywhere and I've found the notes of a C major chord, a G major chord. This is a scale shape. We can play it anywhere and it generates the notes of a major scale. A major scale is just a set of notes. That's all, right? So if I play this shape here on the 3rd fret, I just got the 7 notes of the G major scale because I started on G, right? And then I could figure out what notes I played. The G major scale is G, A, B, C, D, E, F sharp, and G. And I can use my fretboard and this shape to help me generate major scales. I don't have to memorize them. I don't have to have all the theory memorized. I can just use the shape, use my fretboard. I'm making major scales. That's step one. Get comfortable with that concept. Get comfortable with that shape. Step two is to number these notes. I'm going to number them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and then this last note is just 1 again. I don't have to worry about that. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and I'm going to write those numbers using Roman numerals. Big Roman numerals, just like that. So now, instead of thinking about C sharp, F sharp, I can say, oh, play 4. That was this. Play 6. That was this. Play 1. That was this. We're referring to them by these numbers instead. Every one of these notes gets its own kind of chord. Some of these notes get major chords and some get minor chords. Numbers 1, 4, and 5, this note, and this note, they all get major chords. So I'll go to this note and I'll give it a major chord. You know how to do that as a guitar player because you know this 6-string major shape. This note gets a major chord. You know how to give it a major chord because it gets a 5th-string major shape. And here is also the other major chord. So these are the chords 1, 4, and 5. And hopefully you hear they sound great together, right? A million songs have been written just using the chords 1, 4, and 5. But we also get minor chords. And what we're going to do here is if the chord is minor, we'll take that Roman numeral and we'll make it lowercase instead. So the notes 2, that was this note, that gets a minor chord. The note 3 gets a minor chord, and the note 6 gets a minor chord. Now the 7th, just forget about it. It's a chord called diminished, and I don't want to get into that in this course. I discuss it deeply in the Chord Progression Codex and in my Theory and Songwriting course. Let's just not worry about it. These 6 chords alone are enough to launch an entire songwriting career. And here's what I'd like you to do. With these 6 chords, I want you to start writing music. And just start with this G chord. Start with the 1, and then pick a number between 1 and 6. I'll pick 6. And now pick another chord. I'll pick 2. And maybe let's go to 5, finally. And listen what I've got. I've got 1, 6, 2, 5. And I have a real chord progression that I can start making music with. I can sing on top of that. I can give it a rhythm pattern like we learned. Right? Give it a staccato rhythm pattern, give it a muting pattern, have fun with it. But at least you're writing chords that sound good and work together. These are called diatonic chords. These are chords that exist within a scale. And I'm telling you that like 90% of the music you'll ever hear on the radio is written using just diatonic chords. To reinforce this concept, let's just do it one more time in a different spot. This time I'll pick the 6th fret. That's B flat or A sharp. I would want to call it B flat. But we don't even need to know the names, right? We just have to play the scale. And then we just have to know, oh, this is the 1 and it becomes major. This is the 2 and it becomes minor. So a lot of musicians like to think numbers instead of names because it's all the same stuff. Now I can play a 1 5 6 4, 1 5 6 4, and I'm playing one of the most common chord progressions in history, the 1 5 6 4, but I'm doing it in the key of B flat. And I don't even know the names of the chords I'm playing, right? I'm just playing 1 5 6 4. We can figure out the chords, though. We can say, oh, this is a B flat. What chord is this? Well, it's going to be F major. Okay, what is this? This is a G minor. Oh, this is an E flat major, right? But do we need to know the names? No. Not unless we're communicating it to somebody, not unless we're composing. When you're just writing on your instrument, I want you to think about this. You're writing with numbers, you're picking diatonic chords, that's what we're learning here, chords that are within a scale, and we're making music. And then once we've got those chord progressions, like I said, we can start adding rhythm patterns to them and hopefully starting to write music that sounds like what we hear on the radio. We've gone through the hard work of playing these giant big chords, but now we're going to shave them down a little bit and only play little bits of the chord instead. What you need to know is that every chord that we've learned in this course always was set up in a way where the root note, the bass note, that's like the name of the chord, that was always the lowest sounding note, right? This is an A chord, and guess what note is low? A. But a lot of times we'll play chords like A chords, but A is not on the bass. So like if I just get rid of this low note, if I just play these 5 strings instead, what I have is an A major, but now E is on the bass. And we would call that an inverted A chord. Technically, it's a second inversion. You could also call it an A/E. But my point is that chords often appear in inversion. Chords often appear little bits of chords, maybe broken up or stretched out. They don't always appear as these big blocks like we're seeing them as a guitar player. And when we change the way we're playing a chord, we can create different sound effects. For example, here is just the top 3 notes of this big A major shape. Right? There's the whole shape. Here's just the high 3 strings. And that sounds really nice for certain styles of music. For certain styles of music, I want that poppy, thin, high sound as opposed to this belligerently loud, low notes in there. So to get used to this concept, we're going to practice a 1-4-1-5 in the key of A. Right now, it would probably be a good idea for you to figure that out. What did I mean by that? Well, build the A major scale, figure out where 1, 4, and 5 are, give them the major chords, and you'll know what I'm about to teach you. I'm about to teach you this chord progression right here, which goes from an A major shape, just the thin strings, to a D major shape, then back to an A major, and then up to an E. And I'm going to play these chords with this rhythm pattern of down, up, up, up. And those in-betweens are chukkas. Down, 1 and 2 and 3 and 4. Now, the big challenge here is making sure that you don't hit extra strings, right? We don't have the luxury of slamming in all the strings. Now we need to be a little bit more precise. So I use this hand a lot to mute extra strings. You'll see me rubbing up against that 4th string sometimes and just making sure that it's a little bit cleaner. But if we practice it slow, here's what it sounds like. It's 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and D, A, E. Again. Speed it up. Ska, reggae, beach music, party music, right? Pretty popular stuff, and I don't think it would sound nearly as good if I was... You know, that's more of a rock song. That's more of a punk rock song. So different variations, different inversions for different styles of music. Once you're done with that, I recommend you do the exact same chord progression, just in a different key. This time, we're going to start on D, and we didn't really talk about how to do this, but we're building a major scale now on the 5th string, and I'm going to do the same math, and I'm going to end up with these chords for 1, 4, 1, 5. I'll do the math for you, but it's going to be 1 is D, and then 4 is G, and then 1 is D, and then to A. So those are going to be my 4 chords, D, G, D, A. Those 4 chords, except we're only playing the top parts of them. So D, G, D, A. Same rhythm pattern. Ooh, let me try that again. All right, 1, 4, 1, 5, 2 different keys using partial chords, not using the entire chord, but just these little thin parts of the chord. There's a few advanced techniques that you should be prepared to encounter as a guitar player. The first one is sliding bar chords. This is nothing simple about this, but what you're going to try to do is you're going to try to play a note, or a bar chord, and as all the notes sustain, you're going to let your entire bar chord configuration slide up or down to another fret. And the only real advice I can give you here is that I'm really trying to anchor my thumb and like twist around my thumb. My thumb is providing that pressure, so I'm not letting my thumb detach. I'm really pushing in my thumb and letting my fingers twist around my thumb. So it's about getting my hand in preparation for that ahead of time. I know that I need to do a slide, so I'm getting my fingers kind of skewed in that angle where it's easy to squeeze them over like that, all right? But you will have to get used to this kind of thing. A good example is in Fly Away by Lenny Kravitz. There's a lot of this. Right? That little slide right there is a nice sound, and there's really only one way to do it, and it's to practice this technique. So the exercise I have for you here is just going to go like this. We're going to do a downstroke and then a slide, and then we're going to do down, up, chuck. So it's 1 and 2 and 3, and then backwards. Really good exercise, but I expect it to be painful. You can see the lines there are poking in on my fingers because it takes a lot of pressure to get that ringing out. I also need you to be prepared that a lot of bar chords will experience legato within inside them. Legato is hammer-ons and pull-offs. So you're going to be kind of ready. You need to be ready for something like a D major bar chord to appear and then a hammer-on with your pinky happening at the same time. And the exercise I've given you is going to sound something like this. It's going to be down, down, up, down, up, and then down, 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 down. Little sloppy there. This stuff is kind of hard to get it just clean. But I have given you a difficult exercise here to practice. I just want you to get used to that idea of, keeping some shapes in place and also having some legato moving on at the same time. Pretty common theme to see here when you're working with bar chords. If you made it this far, you should be pretty confident and pretty competent with your bar chord skills. But there's a lot more that I just want to kind of open the window here for you, because I can only take you so far. The first thing is to recognize we haven't learned any 4th string shapes or 3rd string shapes, and there's plenty of them out there, and I want you to explore on your own and try to figure them out. But for posterity's sake, I do want you to know that if we put our index finger on the 4th string, I can make a movable shape that looks like this. It's a major shape. It's not very comfortable, it's not very convenient, but it is a movable shape. And I can say, oh, this note is G, I'm playing a G. This note is G sharp, I'm playing a G sharp. So it's the same concept as before, but there's really no bar with the index finger. The bar is happening with our ring finger. So we can think of that as a 4th string major shape. We can also have this 4th string minor shape, just like this. Same idea, movable, slidable, very practical and usable. Another common one that you're going to see is this one. This kind of looks like a C chord, but it's movable. You can see I'm kind of building up my fingers where if I did it down here, it would be a C, but I slide it up here and it becomes this movable shape that my finger comes across. And here, my root is on the 5th string. So whatever note my pinky is playing, I'm playing that major chord. So now I'm playing an A major. Now I'm playing a G major. Now I'm playing an E major, right? You also need to be aware that there's many types of chords out there that aren't just major and minor. There's 7th chords, there's major 7th chords, minor 7th chords, dominant 7th chords, diminished 7th chords. And this is what I get into in my book, The Chord Progression Codex. I even get into the very basic 7th chords in my theory and songwriting course. So I strongly recommend you check those out if you are remotely interested in this topic or if you found this course enjoyable. But to just give you a general overview, these are movable shapes. So here's the A major, as we learned, the 6th string major shape. Here is a 6th string 7th shape. That's what we call this, dominant 7th or just 7th. So if you learn this shape, now you're playing every 7th chord. You're playing G7, you're playing F7, you're playing C7. And hopefully you can hear those are bluesy chords, as opposed to something like major 7ths. Major 7ths are not bluesy, they're more jazzy, more smooth, right? So if you learn that shape, Now you're writing jazz progressions because, you know, you don't just know the major and minor, but you know the minor sevenths, the major sevenths. They all have their own different colors. So I do want you to know that shape at least. Major, dominant seventh, major seventh, and then there's a minor seventh shape that we can play like this, which isn't the way I would want to play it, but it is a way to play minor seventh. Those are all rooted on the 6th string. Additionally, you can see these 5th string rooted shapes, which I'll start here on D. I've got D dominant 7, which we would just call D7. This is a movable shape. Again, we can move this around and get different 7th chords with the root on the 5th string. And then I can get D major 7 with this shape. Right? That's that jazzy chord I was telling you about. And we can also get a D minor 7 with this shape. So those are all really easy shapes. I enjoy all of those shapes, which goes to show you those 5th string shapes, the major one is the hardest. Right? That broken finger chord, that's as hard as they get. The other 5th string shapes are quite easy. So it would be worth your time and effort to explore some of those other 5th string shapes and explore the bigger world of chords, just because you got some easier chords to play too, and more variety in color as well. Congratulations on completing this entire Barre Chord course. I hope you found it worth your time and worth your effort. If you did enjoy this course, you know I'm going to say it. Please check out my other products like Real Rhythm Guitar Level 1 and Level 2, my Theory and Songwriting course, and my book, The Chord Progression Codex. If you appreciated this free course, please spread the word on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, Reddit, wherever you're at on social media. That would really help me out. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the future.